Hi there, it's Kevin with the Rogue Market. We have the Final Fantasy pre-release upon us, which means there are going to be a lot of people inspired to build cards from the commanders they pulled from the pre-release. So in this list, we are going to be focusing on the top 10 cards from the Final Fantasy set, not from the Final Fantasy Commander set. And we're going to pick a card from each one of those commanders that has the potential of going up. Now, this is a list that was generated from looking at EDH rec data, so the number 1 is the most submitted deck, and the number 10 is still quite heavily submitted. I'm actually surprised, well, actually not surprised at this set, because there is a lot of decks being brewed right now from these cards. This is definitely a home run of a set when it comes to Commander, and there will be a lot of cards that are going to spike from these cards. So again, not focusing on the Final Fantasy pre-constructed decks, the commander decks. This is just to make the legendary creatures that come out of the set. So we're going to start off with number 10. And number 10 is the Kuja Genome Sorcerer. And this one is going to be focusing on basically creating a bunch of black wizard creature tokens, and then when casting non-creature spells and doing a damage, and then when it flips, it deals double damage. And so for this particular card, I'm actually going to go with an uncommon out of Bloomburrow, which is the Coruscation Mage. Now, this card I think would be a lot more if it wasn't in the starter sets from Bloomburrow, but according to TCG Player, look how many of these sell per day. This is just crazy amounts of sales. 27 per day. You can see that there are people that continually do spec into these at a quarter piece, and that's where I think you should be targeting them. According to the market price, it does look like they're 30 cents. And we have a Card Kingdom spread, which is really good here. So they sell them for $1.29 at Card Kingdom, and there is a little bit of arbitrage opportunity because they do buy for 26 cents. So if you can actually find them for like 20 cents, I mean, it's not the greatest payday, but we've actually done some packages within $300-400 by doing this exact same strategy. I don't do it as much anymore because it's very time consuming, and there's a lot of other like hidden fees with shipping and stuff that actually do cut into your profit margins. But the best way to do is to look through like bulk lots for the Coruscation Mage, people that drafted in this time period. You want to kind of target Bloomburrow for. Bloomburrow is actually a really good set for this. A lot of the uncommons and the commons have what we call real value. So, of course, you look at TCG data, like every card tends to be around the 15 to 25 cent, but you actually have to look at the ones that are selling, and those actually have what I call real world value because you actually can sell them. And so going to a TCG Player, I don't think this quarter is going to stay for that much longer. I think the price is being kept down because Bloomburrow is still being open quite a bit, but also because this is in the starter set. Now, starter sets I think are just a great spec by themselves. I think I can still get them for like $12 or something, and they actually do have a $12 card in them, and then they have I believe two Coruscation Mages in them. So this card just, it seems like almost every set that comes out has a commander that wants to utilize this card, and it's kind of like Gutter Snipe, but it hasn't had the Gutter Snipe being printed a billion times problem at the moment. So again, high supply because being in those starter kits, but anything that has like an arbitrage availability from Card Kingdom, I think is a great opportunity to get in if you can find. Again, find these cards for 10 cents a piece, which is very, very feasible. I think is just a win. On to the next card, my number 9. My number 9 is going to be the Lightning Army of One, or not my number 9, the ninth most played commander right now, according to EDH Rec, is Lightning Army of One. So this one is a first strike trample lifelink, and whenever lightning deals combat damage to a player until your next turn, if a source would deal damage to that player or a permanent that player controls, it deals double that damage instead. So the card that I picked that has the most potential of going up is the Overpowering Attack. So this one is a lot of taking extra combats is what people are building off. So it might not be how I would particularly build this commander. What I like to look at is like the trends of what most people are looking, and it does seem to be taking extra attack phases is where they are running with this Lightning Army of One, because once you get that extra, does this stack to when it deals combat damage to player until the next turn? If a source would deal damage to that player, it deals double, so it deals double again. I believe it does. I believe they both do stack, so taking that extra, it hits once, you take an extra attack phase, it hits again, and then it will start to deal double upon double, and yeah, it can get out of control really quickly. And so one of the best extra attack phases that centers around a commander hitting is definitely Overpowering Attack. You untap all creatures you control that attack this turn. If it's your main phase, there's additional combat phase after this, followed by additional main phase. And the free running ability makes this cost less if you control your commander. So it does say Assassin, but also has this commander thing in here. So the Assassin's Creed is starting to dry up as far as supply of the Beyond boosters, and collectors are actually really hard to find at this point. So I'm expecting a lot of cards from this set just to go up. I mean, anything that sees any decent amount of play is going to start to increase. And this is another great card with 12 sold per day. And if we actually click on the 1 month, it stayed very stagnant here at this 12 per day. But 12 is a great number when you're looking. This is another little tactic I use is you look at the total sold versus how much is left. And this should be, like you look at the 3 month, I mean, this is only going to take 6 months, a little bit like 6 months at this rate to like currently sell through this. Of course, there will be more listings. You can't just be like, oh, this number will inevitably outstretch this, because there will be a certain amount that will be listed every time, a seller joins this platform. They're going to be list these cards that have been building up, or whenever these sellers buy collections. So again, it's not a good like one for one, but you can see that this number will eventually outstretch. If we look at the year mark, the 7,000. Of course, this was more recent set. Was it over a year ago? I believe it was when this was released. But so that has died down. But the supply is definitely running short for the Assassin's Creed compared to what it once was. And yeah, this is a great way to kind of compare the numbers here. So overpowering attack again. It seems like almost every set they release, they have cards that red, especially decks, want to attack and take extra attack phases. Not just in the commander that are released, but other cards out of every set seem to have one. And this card is just going to get better and better and more desired as time goes on. On to my number 8. My number 8, or not the number 8, the number 8 most played commander is Tifa Lockhart. This is actually a very interesting card. There were a couple cards that were already spiked because of this, and we didn't choose them for that reason. So for this particular card that wants to have landfall triggering, whenever land you control enters, you double Tifa Lockhart's power. Like, definitely a good thing to equip to and then start doubling with the landfall. But I think that the Entish Restoration was the card we picked for this one, because it does work with if you control a creature with power 4 or greater. So if you can get Tifa's power up higher, and then you can sacrifice land, you can end up getting Search Your Life for 2 basic land cards, put one on the battlefield tap, and then shuffle. You control a creature with power 4 or greater, instead Search Your Life for up to 3 basic lands and put them on the battlefield. So you get all 3 of them on the battlefield, and then it doubles, and then this is just going to be your typical Voltron commander that's going to one-shot an opponent after that. If again, you want a good starting point with Tifa's power, such as equipment, such as pumping it up in any other way, and then casting something like the Entish Restoration. And what's cool about this card too is there are some other commanders on this list, and there are some just right outside the top 10 where this is also a card that saw a lot of play in those commanders. So that's the one thing. We go back to the mage here. This one actually hit a lot of lists too. In fact, the number 1 played commander on this list had a heavy amount of usage. I believe almost 40-50% of the decks were actually running the mage in that deck as well. So yeah, I think this is a pretty good pick with the Entish Restoration, because there will be some other commanders too on this list that had like a 20%, 50% of deck list that people were building with were including this card as well. So if we look at, according to TCG Player, it is pretty much its low for quite some time. Yeah, so it's had a few times this was lower. And the Card Kingdom spread is quite not where we really want it, but they are buying a ton of them. So that's another little metric we use a lot of times, is looking at how much of a platform like Card Kingdom is willing to buy, and that kind of gives you an overall feel of where the card is going. Because they use an algorithm here at Card Kingdom. They try to keep an inventory of a certain amount of cards, and so when they sell through that inventory, a good way to see how much they're selling is to go here and see the max quantity they're actually buying. And that gives you a better picture here. So again, yeah, the spread isn't great as far as Card Kingdom versus the TCG, but I mean, this card does have 25, 30. It's actually picking up 33 per day. And Lord of the Rings is almost done with its print run. We had one last wave of set boosters, and I think it's done now. I think Final Fantasy is now taking it for the Universes Beyond slot, just like when Warhammer, Lord of the Rings kind of replaced the Warhammer. Now we're into Final Fantasy. And they're not going to, in my opinion, I believe so. I don't think they're going to be reprinting Lord of the Rings. I don't know if you had an official last call from distributors, but I think they are definitely either slowing down or we're done with the print run for Lord of the Rings. On to the number 7. The number 7 is going to be the Noctis Prince of Lucas, or Lucis. I don't know. I've never played this Final Fantasy. We have a 4/3 lifelinker, and you may cast artifact spells from your graveyard by paying 3 life in addition to paying their cost. And then it enters with finality counter. And so the card we picked for this is Solemnity. So Solemnity is really cool because it actually kind of hacks this, because they can't enter with a finality counter, and so you can loop with Noctis. So then you cast something like the Phyrexian Unlife or the Angel's Grace, and then you can basically infinite combo with Noctis Prince. But you do need Solemnity. It's one of the key cards in these kind of these lists that are running these infinite combos with the card. And the spread on Card Kingdom isn't the greatest here. They are buying it for quite low, and they're only buying 51, so that's something to keep in mind. So just let me get a few other printings. I can't remember if this had a list printing, I believe, of why it's so down. No, it has not. It's never had another printing, huh? So yeah, this one should rebound pretty quickly. Again, a great way to do this is just look from its 1 month to 3 month, and this has gone up quite a bit. And you can see actually the sales are a little bit higher than this. There's a lot sold per day in the last few days. And I think that's mainly because of this commander where Solemnity is getting a lot of more attention. Not sure if this one made the list of like EDH or CDH potential. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. I thought I did see this one, like a lot of people building around this one particularly for that, because it's quite easy to set up these combos with Noctis. And again, Solemnity I think is a big piece of most of those. On to my number 6. My number 6 is going to be the Sin, Spire's Punishment. This card was actually really, really hyped when it was first spoiled. It was one of the very first card spoils, so there were people already brewing a lot of decks with it. When it enters or attacks, you exile a permanent card from your graveyard at random and then create a tap token that's a copy of that card. And if it's a land, you repeat this process. So, of course, you want to be running a heavy land base in your graveyard and then cards that have big payoff. And the card we picked for this is Splunking. Splunking is really cool with this card. And Splunking I also picked because it went a lot of other lists on this, a lot of other commanders on this list wanted to use Splunking. So when a land enters the battlefield, it doesn't enter tapped. And that's kind of one of the drawbacks with Sin, is it's a really, really heavy converted mana cost at 7. And then those lands, the copies of the lands come into play tapped. So the token ones come into play tapped. But Solemnity are Splunking actually makes them come into play untapped. So you can actually do some pretty wild stuff if you have Splunking out. And then you have Sin. And you can have all that mana available to then cast other things. And then even flicker effects, even things that mill even more. You can go pretty crazy. And this is one of the cards that really enables it. And is still out of a Lost Caverns of Ixalan. Lost Caverns of Ixalan and Wilds Will Drain have not had their last calls. They're still standard eligible, so they actually could see some more reprinting. They don't rotate this next standard too, so there will be more supply of this coming down. It's not like a Brothers War or a Dominaria that's already had its last call, so don't believe all the people that say that this isn't going to be reprinted, because it still definitely is eligible. But if you look at this though, you can definitely see 30 cards sold per day. This is an incredibly hot card that continually gets purchased, and it's just a kind of a mainstay in the Commander format, and it's at its low right now, or close to its low. You can see here its 3 month is definitely at its low. So this is a great time to get in to the Splunking, and as I stated, it's already started to increase in how many are purchased per day, because there are a lot of commanders on this list that do utilize this card. On to my number 5. Number 5 is going to be the Kefka Court Mage, and Kefka turns into Kefka Ruler of Ruin. Whenever Kefka enters or attacks, each player discards a card. When you draw a card for each card type among cards discarded this way, and then you can transform it. And the card that is just such a duck card that's at its like year low right now is Waste Not. Now Waste Not sees so much play in Commander. It's a pet card of mine. It's a pet card of so many people. It's rated one of the most fan favorite cards printed of all times, and it sees the sales really back it up. It sells 12 per day. It's increasing now up to 18 per day, and of course it's really because there's multiple cards in this set too that want to work off of making opponents discard. There's a lot of things that do make opponents and players in general discard from this set, and so Waste Not's going to have an uptick from that. But yeah, in this deck it's just super strong with the Kefka, because you're going to be making people discard cards. You're going to then be getting even more draw value off the Waste Not. And you do want some engines that will help this deck, and Waste Not is definitely in that. And yeah, so again, what I like about this is it is at its low for quite some time. So this was reprinted out of the Enchanted Tales, and this is the least expensive version, and I actually think it will be something long term. If they reprint Waste Not in future, I think this is going to be the preferred art and the preferred frame that people are going to go back to. I think that all of the Enchanted Tales are going to age really well long term, and especially if Wizards change their tone, I think they might. I think they're starting to see these other games like One Piece and even in Final Fantasy with things that are like the serialized cards or just the specialty stuff, that maybe they need to tone down on creating so many versions and so many specialty versions, and then actually let when they do an alternate art, let that be more rare than it really is. The problem what they did in the the booster fun era is these were as common as normal versions. Like Waste Not, this is probably has the highest supply of Waste Not is from this Enchanted Tales version, compared to even like the ones that were released in their main set. And that should not be the case. When these things get printed, they should actually be a lower supply with subsequent reprints. So that's what's kind of the why this card's the cheapest version. Is because it probably has the most supply out there. But long term, I think that this one will age better than the rest of them. And if we actually look at Card Kingdom, there is actually that arbitrage opportunity. You can buy these for $1.50, and you can immediately sell them to Card Kingdom for $2.25. And so that's actually quite a decent little spread. That if you could do that in the hundreds, I mean, you could actually make a pretty decent chunk of change. Again, it's something I don't engage in like I used to, but in the past we used to do this quite often. From either buying collections or even like specking on TCG Player, or even what you can do too with TCG Player is you can add your own buy list, and then people or what we did with Card Sphere too. That's another thing that I haven't utilized in a long time. It's like put 100 copies up of Waste Not on Card Sphere for like $1, and you'd be surprised at how quickly those would be filled. And then we just turn around and get store credit with Card Kingdom. And then when we sell cards to our locals and didn't have cards, we'd actually use the store credit, because even using the store credit at Card Kingdom would be cheaper than trying to pay all the shipping and stuff like that off of TCG Player. So it's like something that we learned how to utilize quite well. Again, I don't utilize as much anymore because I'm not into this, now with a lot of other avenues I've pursued, this is not as great. But if you are starting out, this is a nice little avenue, nice little thing you definitely need to pick up and learn how to do. Alrighty, so on to my number 4. My number 4 is the Terra Magical Adept. And when Terra enters, mill 5 cards. Put up to 1 enchantment card milled this way into your hand, and then you can exile it to transform it into Esper Terra, which creates a token of a copy of a non-legendary enchantment. There are a couple of good ones in this one. This was actually a hard one to pick because I think a lot of things are going to spike. But went with Yenna, the Red Tooth Regent, because this has a cool little combo. You can choose target enchantment you control that doesn't have the same name as another permanent, create a token, except it isn't legendary, and untap Yenna, and then the token is an Aria on top of it, so it's not going to be Aura. So you're going to create basically a token of it. It's going to create another copy of something else, and then you can just use this for the sacrifice at the beginning of your next end step. So you actually copy this. I believe how it works is you can copy this on your opponent's turn, and then it can be eligible again the next turn to untap and copy it again. Like, you can get so much value out of Yenna. So basically just go like an Enchantment Matters base deck, and it just combos very well with Terra. If you can see here, it actually isn't worth anything. So this is actually one of our bulk rare specs, but it is increased per day almost by 50% since this card has come out. Went from 10 per day to 16 per day. I just like this card as a general spec because I think that like a rare that sells 10 per day, it can't stay around this 50-cent range. It's got to go up more like the $2 range in the long term. And you can see this is actually quite low for Wild Zeal Drain rares, having 1,500 on the open market, and you can actually go, up to 6 months. It's sold more than 1,500. So, I showed that earlier with another card. I think this is a better example of a card that might have the ability to stretch out the supply a lot faster. All right, on to my number 3. My number 3 is going to be Choco, Seeker of Paradise. This is a 3/5 whenever one of our birds you control attack. Look that many cards from the top of your library. You may put one of them in your hand, and then put any number of land cards from among them into your onto the battlefield tapped, and the rest in your graveyard. So a lot of people are building bird tribal with this, and some of those cards that existed from even Homelands. I remember I think there was a Homelands card that spiked, maybe a card around that era like Weatherlight or Homelands. And some of those low supply tribal birds. This is fine. There have been tribal birds before, but this one is it's a chocobo. People are going to be building this like crazy. But I think this actually works better with landfall, because whenever land you control enters, it gets +1/+0 until the turn. And yeah, it turns out to be more like a Voltron-y type card for that type of ability, but it's kind of weak in the scope of things. There's a lot of other landfall things that are better. So I don't know, this card, it's surprising me that this one is actually being built as heavily as it is, because it just must be a fan favorite with chocobos and tribal and stuff like that for a more casual based deck. But the card is Purge Protection that we chose for this, because you create 4 2/2 blue bird creature tokens. After looking at the things that actually create a lot, so this card wants to trigger multiple times. Whenever one or more bird cards you control attack, look at that many cards from the top of your library. So it's looking at that many cards per bird that's attacking. So you want as many out as possible. And it's one that does create at least 4 for 1 is going to be perch protection. So you create 4 2/2 blue bird creature tokens with flying. If they give us promise, which you probably won't, all permanents you control phase out. So it is a way to protect your board and maybe give an opponent, like, what's really cool about this card is, like, someone casts a board wipe. You give someone that probably won't recover from that board wipe a extra turn, and it's not that big of a deal because they might take a few turns to recover. All of your things phase out. You're fine from it, and then you get your bird tokens after that. So you basically negate the board wipe for your side of things. The gift isn't that detrimental to someone that gets hit harder than everyone else. But if you don't need to gift it, I think a lot of people actually look at a card and they're like, oh, this sucks. I don't ever want to use this top ability. Okay, they ignore it and just use the bottom ability, which creates 4 2/2 birds. And what I like about this card the most is it actually has, I actually must have closed, there we go. It actually has very low supply left. And look at this, it's sold 1,888. This is so cheap for a card that has sold that many copies. And I believe it's never had a reprinting. This is just the only printing that's had. So this is just a low supply myth or rare, which might as well be a mythic because it's only included in one commander deck, I believe. And yeah, it's just super, super low supply compared to how many is sold. Like, this is going to be stretched quick in 10 days from here. And is there going to be enough Bloomburrow commander decks, which are basically they're expensive now, right? Let me check the Bloomburrow. I think these have gone up. Bloomburrow commander set. So commander deck display. So yeah, it's up to 167. So they're recovering. So this did have a reprint recently, and it went. I mean, these were crazy expensive, $300. Then they got this reprint here, and then now they've been stagnant for a while, but now they've been increasing quite a bit. And same thing, you can see the supply of these are going down quite quickly. So yeah, there's not gonna be a lot more supply of this perch protection either. So this is a really, really good one. From this actually probably is my favorite spec in this entire list of cards that I'm have the most faith in. Again, there were some really, really good specs that then spiked up before we got this video out, and we had to change some of the cards, which especially the 1 and 2 had those cards. But anyway, let's go on to my number 2, which is going to be the Sephro Fabled Soldier. This card, I'm surprised isn't the number 1 built card. Well, actually not, because the number 1 built card is insanely popular. But Sephro Fabled Soldier enters or attacks, and you sacrifice another creature if you do draw a card. Whenever another creature dies, target opponent loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. So this is really cool because it's a blood artist on a commander. And it's going to be, basically, it's going to be another blood artist for any deck that wants to use it. And it's going to be a blood artist on a commander, so it's going to be insanely popular. And of course, when it flips, it's even more broken. So you get emblems every time it transforms. So the card that we picked for this one is going to be Drivnod Carnage Dominus. As this, there of course, all the other blood artist effects were pretty duh. But looking at the card that had the most potential as far as where its price was concerned, it definitely was the Drivnod. So this is a mythic out of the Phyrexial Obli 1, and if a creature dying causes a trigger ability of a permanent you control to trigger, that ability triggers an additional time. So we get double triggers off of this, and what I really liked from this was just the low supply that's left of this card versus how many sell. And I think we will see a big uptick in this because it had this was like a 35% in decks that were running Sephiroth, which is, like, I personally don't think I'd run it because I think that it's too late for a card like this. It depends on how casually you want to go with Sephiroth, but typically with Sephiroth, how you're going to build it is just super low to the ground with a bunch of creatures that want to die and come back, and you run things like Phyrexian Altar, and that's just a rinse and repeat. There's a lot of things that have, like, the Phyrexian Altar combos, so cards that basically going to be recast for a black mana, so you sacrifice it and then rinse and repeat and just one-shot your opponent. So this card's just a little too late, but casually speaking, like doubling the trigger effects of things dying and then building like a sacrifice-based matters deck, Drivnod goes perfect in those. And the thing I like about Drivnod too is it's actually a card that sees a lot of play in Commander, so this card's going to be going up anyway. And this All-Will-Be-One absolutely has had its last call. So there's not more supply of All-Will-Be-One that's really going to be trickling into the market. There's no more printings at least, and so yeah, it's basically hit its peak supply, and you can see its peak supply is going to be outstretched pretty quickly, as this 1 year sold 2,000 copies, and now we're sitting about 10 per day. So it's another 3,000 copies going to be, 2.5 to 3,000 copies going to be sold in the next year if trends keep up. And yeah, this is going to be absolutely stretched from the supply. On to my number one. My number one is going to be the Vivy Ornitier. This card is just so many deck videos I've seen, so many lists I've seen. I think everyone's building this commander wrong. Everyone's building this as a Spellslinger. I think this is actually one that is better with like Hercule's Recall and bouncing artifacts. Isn't Hercule Recall the card that returns all artifacts to the owner's hand? And there's a couple other ones that return all of your own artifacts back to your hand. And so just doing a bunch of 0-drop artifacts with Vivy, I think, is just insane. You can actually infinite combo quite quickly with that. There have been some cards that spiked up pretty quickly with this one's like Ophidian's Eye and Quicksilver Elemental, but there are still some decent ones, like the one we picked for this one is Harmonic Prodigy. And Harmonic Prodigy, I believe, hit like 7 commanders. There's so many wizards in this Final Fantasy set that this card is just going to go in so many commanders because it just triggers wizards an additional time. So an ability of the shaman or another wizard you control triggers, that ability triggers another time. And so if you actually look at Vivy, it's going to be on curve. So this, of course, this is what a lot of commander players like to look at. So turn 2, you cast the Harmonic Prodigy. Turn 3, you cast Vivy, and then you start casting your non-creature spells, and it's getting 2 counters per turn and doing a damage. And this is going to take up the mana quite quickly, and then you can start adding the mana to do your shenanigans with the card. So the Harmonic Prodigy has been going up, like it has had its big increase from 3 to 6, but I think there's a lot more room for this card to go up. And if we go from the 3 months to the 1 month, you can see it's almost doubled. Not quite doubled, but the increase of average daily sold has gone up quite a bit. And if you actually look at the data, this is being purchased like crazy in 1-ofs. This is what we love to see. So people are purchasing these in 1-ofs. You know that's for commander deck lists. There's already ones up to $7. So this is something in there's a little bit of lag between the market price and the most recent sale. See if you can still find some cheap copies, like even these ones at 360. So this is a perfect example. 363. Lightly played for 131 shipped. You buy all 20 of them. So you put all 20 of them in the cart, buy them all, and item not available since this icon's been made. So yeah, this is people are definitely buying these at a high. But if you can always find that's a great way to do that, because then you can turn around and I always love sorting by like high shipping, because oftentimes you can find these sellers that are doing like this higher shipping. I guess 131 is kind of the benchmark for the lower shipping, but it's not shipping included at least. And then for these lower end cards, like you just at 20, that puts the cost per card down to what, like 7 cents a piece, and that's where you make all your margins here, versus the lowest sold with the free shipping being like the 535. Anyway, that is my list of the cards that I think are going to go up. A lot of these again do have overlap from other cards, and what I like about this list too is I think every card on this list has they're really at their lows, and there will be so many other cards that are printed that are going to spike these cards in the future. So basically, the name of the game is dodging reprints, and a lot of these on this list I think are very tough. Like Wast, not so much. That one I think could be printed in a lot of commander decks going forward or other slots, but it's at its low, so now is a pretty good time. Anyway, I'd like to know your list of cards that you think would go up. I think we're going to do it live. I think Talmadge and I were discussing that maybe we'll show our process of going through cards live, of showing you how we pick cards for these particular ones for the actual commander set. So the commander set, I'm not sure we'll have 10 commanders to choose from. There's 4 commanders, but we'll be looking at 10 cards from the Final Fantasy commander set that still have the potential of going up. Thing is, we're a little late to the party for that, because those tend to spike quicker than these cards that come out of the set and just kind of trickle. Like people, I opened this at a pre-release, I'm going to build around it. Didn't know this card existed, I'm going to build around it. Even at my discussion at my pre-release tables today, there are so many people that were just having that conversation as they opened up the cards. I hope you enjoyed this video. This has been Kevin with the Rogue Market. Appreciate everyone for sticking around. We're going to try to up now that Final Fantasy is done and we're done with all the shipping and all the, oh man, this was a insane release. And I've just spent the last 4 or 5 days just shipping packages and making everything squared away for this release. But now we should have a lot more time to produce videos. I know I sound like a broken record saying that, but it is on my bucket list to do to revive this channel. Thanks for watching.